The mountain didn't scare me. The people on it did. These are two stories about ordinary people who went into the mountains expecting nothing more than a normal day. Instead, they left with questions that still don't have answers. No monsters, no ghost stories. Just real places, real people, and a series of unsettling events that never made sense. If even half of what these people experienced was intentional, then someone was watching them long before they realized they weren't alone. This is what happened. I never went back to that mountain, even after the police told me they couldn't find anyone up there. My name's Daniel Carter. I'm 33, and I work as a survey technician for a civil engineering company in Boise, Idaho. Most of my job involves checking land before construction projects, and sometimes that means hiking into places most people never visit. I've always preferred working outdoors over sitting behind a desk. Back in September 2023, my company sent me to inspect an old access trail on the edge of the Sawtooth National Forest. A communications company wanted to see if they could build a small relay station near the top of a mountain. Locals mostly ignored. The trail wasn't closed, but hardly anyone used it anymore. I was supposed to spend one afternoon collecting GPS points, take photos, and head back before dark. About an hour into the hike, I noticed something that didn't make much sense. Fresh tire tracks. The trail was too narrow for regular vehicles. The only thing that could fit was an ATV, but there were signs at the entrance saying motorized vehicles weren't allowed. I figured someone ignored the rules. It wasn't a big deal. About 20 minutes later, I reached an old fire lookout foundation. The tower had been removed years ago, leaving only cracked concrete and rusted bolts sticking out of the ground. That's where I met the only other person I saw that day, an older man wearing a faded green jacket. He looked at my survey equipment and asked, "You with the county?" I said no. "Private engineering company." He nodded without smiling. "You shouldn't stay up here after 4. I laughed a little. "Why?" He shrugged. "People come up after that." Before I could ask what he meant, he started walking downhill. I watched him disappear around a bend. I assumed he meant hunters or teenagers. Nothing about the conversation seemed important until later. I kept working. Around 3:30, I finished my measurements and started hiking back. That's when I realized someone had moved my backpack. I'd left it leaning against a rock while I measured a slope. Now it was sitting about 15 feet away. Nothing was missing. Every zipper was still closed. I told myself I'd probably forgotten exactly where I'd set it. Still, I was almost certain I hadn't. As I continued downhill, I heard an ATV engine somewhere below me. Then it stopped. Completely. No driving away, just silence. The trail twisted through thick trees, so I couldn't see very far ahead. About 10 minutes later, I found fresh footprints crossing the trail. Heavy work boots. They weren't there earlier. I knew that because I'd photographed part of that section for erosion documentation. The footprints weren't following the trail, they crossed it. From one side of the woods to the other, almost like whoever made them didn't want to be seen walking on the path. That finally made me uncomfortable. I picked up my pace. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. No service. But somehow I'd received a text. It came from an unknown number. It simply said, "Don't use the lower trail." I stopped walking. There was no signal. I even checked. Nothing. I looked around, expecting someone to step out and admit it was a joke. Nobody. The lower trail split off about half a mile ahead. I stood there for almost a minute. Then I decided to stay on the main trail instead. Maybe someone had sent the text earlier and it had just now come through. That seemed reasonable enough. Until I reached the trail junction. A large, fallen pine tree completely blocked the lower path. It looked fresh, needles still green. If I'd taken that route, I would have had to climb over it. While I was looking at the tree, I heard voices, not close, maybe 50 yards into the woods. Men, at least 2 of them. One said, "He's still up here." Another answered, "He'll come through." I froze. Neither voice sounded like they were talking to me directly, almost like they didn't know exactly where I was. I slowly backed away without making much noise. That's when a rock landed on the trail, about 10 feet in front of me. It hadn't rolled. It dropped from uphill. I looked up. Nothing, just trees. I left the trail and moved behind some brush. For nearly 5 minutes, I stayed completely still. I heard footsteps, slow, crunching leaves. Then one voice. "Truck's probably at the south lot." The footsteps moved away. I didn't wait. Instead of following the trail, I used my GPS to cut across the hillside toward the parking area. It was slower and harder, but I didn't care. About 20 minutes later, I finally saw my truck. Relief hit me instantly. Then I noticed another pickup parked beside mine. Dark blue. No license plate on the front. 3 men stood near it. None of them looked at each other. They were all looking toward the trail, waiting. I ducked behind some trees before they noticed me. There was no way I was walking into that parking lot. I stayed hidden until I saw one of them point toward the trail entrance. Another climbed into the truck. The engine started. They drove away without ever checking the woods behind them. I waited another 15 minutes before running to my truck. The first thing I noticed was a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. It wasn't there earlier. It only had one sentence. Wrong mountain, no signature, nothing else. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. A deputy listened carefully, took the note, and asked if anyone had threatened me directly. I said no. They searched the trail the next morning. According to them, they found the fallen tree, ATV tracks, and signs that several people had recently camped somewhere off the mountain, but they never found the men or the blue pickup. A week later, my company canceled the survey project. Officially, it was because of access concerns. Unofficially, my supervisor admitted another contractor had reported feeling like someone was following him in the same area the month before. He quit before finishing the job. I tried forgetting about the whole thing. Then, almost 6 months later, I was organizing photos from old work projects. One image caught my attention. It was one I'd taken near the Fire Lookout Foundation. At first, I was looking at the terrain. Then I noticed something in the background. Between 2 trees, a man, standing perfectly still, watching me. He wasn't there when I took the picture. At least, I never saw him. The timestamp showed it was taken nearly an hour before the old man warned me not to stay after 4. I've zoomed in on that photo dozens of times. The face is too blurry to identify. But one detail has always bothered me. He's wearing the same faded green jacket as the man I spoke to. I've never figured out whether he was trying to warn me or making sure I stayed exactly where someone else expected me to be. I still don't know why that family kept showing up everywhere we went. My name is Jake Sullivan. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. I work as an insurance claims adjuster. which means I spend most of my week driving to people's homes after accidents or storms. My wife, Melissa, is an elementary school teacher, and our daughter, Emma, had just turned 8. In October of 2024, we rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains for a long weekend. It wasn't a camping trip or anything adventurous. We just wanted a few quiet days away from work, school, and our phones. Looking back, I wish we'd picked somewhere else. About an hour after we checked into the cabin, I was unloading groceries when a dark green SUV drove slowly past us. It wasn't unusual. There were other cabins farther up the road, but the SUV came back 20 minutes later. This time it drove even slower. Melissa noticed it. Lost? Probably. That was the end of the conversation, or at least we thought it was. The next morning we drove into the national park and chose an easy trail that led to an old fire tower. There were maybe 6 cars in the parking lot. As we started hiking, Emma pointed ahead. That girl has the same backpack as me. About 50 yards ahead was another family, a man, a woman, and a little girl around Emma's age wearing the exact same purple backpack from Target. Kids have matching backpacks all the time, no big deal, but throughout the hike, they always seemed to stay the same distance ahead of us. Whenever we stopped to take pictures, they stopped. When we took a break, they took a break. When we sped up, somehow they stayed just out of reach. I never got a good look at their faces. It wasn't intentional. They always seemed to turn away at the last second. At one overlook, Emma smiled and waved. The little girl looked directly at her, then slowly turned around and kept walking. Maybe she's shy, Melissa said. Emma looked disappointed but didn't say anything. When we got back to the parking lot, every other vehicle had already left, except ours. The family was gone. So was their SUV. That night we went into town for dinner. Halfway through the meal, Emma asked, "Why was that girl staring at me all day?" Melissa frowned. "I thought you said she never looked at you." Emma shook her head. She did. When? Every time you and Dad weren't looking. Neither of us knew what to say. The next morning we decided to try a completely different part of the park. It was almost 40 minutes away. Different trail, different parking area. As soon as we pulled in, Melissa grabbed my arm 3 rows away. The same dark green SUV, same dent above the back wheel, same missing front license plate. This time, neither of us tried to explain it away. Halfway through the hike, Emma realized she'd left her water bottle near the trailhead. "I'll grab it," I said. When I reached the parking lot, there wasn't another person around. Just our SUV, and the green one. The windows were too dark to see inside. Emma's bottle was sitting exactly where she'd left it. As I picked it up, I noticed something tucked under our windshield wiper, a folded park map. Someone had circled a trail we hadn't planned to hike. Across the top were 3 handwritten words. "Less people here." That was it. No name, no message, nothing else. I looked around, no movement, no footsteps, just silence. I shoved the map into my pocket and walked back without telling Melissa. I didn't want to ruin the trip over something that could have been a stupid joke. That evening we grilled burgers outside the cabin. As the sun started going down, I noticed the green SUV parked about 200 yards away, where the road curved around the hill. It wasn't moving, the headlights were off. It was just sitting there. Melissa looked over. "Is that the same one?" "I think so." "Should we call someone?" "And tell them what?" She didn't answer. Around midnight, I woke up because I heard gravel crunch outside. Not loud, just slow footsteps. I looked through the living room blinds. A flashlight beam moved across our driveway, then disappeared behind the trees. I grabbed my phone. By the time I stepped onto the porch, nothing, no people, no flashlight, no vehicle. The next morning, muddy footprints covered the porch. They stopped directly in front of the living room window. Whoever made them had been standing there, looking inside. We packed the SUV immediately. As Melissa loaded the last suitcase, Emma started crying. She'd forgotten her stuffed fox. I almost told her we'd buy another one. Instead, I drove back. The cabin door was unlocked. I know I locked it. Inside, the fox wasn't upstairs where Emma had left it. It was sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the kitchen table. Beside it was the same folded park map. This time another sentence had been added. You should have taken the other trail. I didn't touch the map. I grabbed the fox, walked out, locked the door, and left. We stopped for gas about an hour later. While Melissa was inside paying, Emma quietly asked, "Dad?" "Yeah? Was that family staying near us?" "I don't think so." She stared out the window. "The little girl was outside my bedroom last night." My stomach dropped. "What? I thought you knew." "She was looking through the window?" I didn't ask her any more questions. I didn't want the answers. When we got home, I looked up the cabin online. One review caught my attention. It had been posted only 2 weeks before our trip. It said, "Beautiful cabin. We kept running into the same family all weekend. It got strange enough that we left a day early." The review was gone the next morning. A few months later, I was organizing photos from that trip. Most of them were normal. Mountains, trails, family pictures. Then I found one Melissa had taken at the first trailhead. Our SUV was in the background. So was the green one. Standing beside it were the man, the woman, and the little girl. All three of them were looking directly at us. I've zoomed in on that photo more times than I can count. The picture is perfectly clear. I can read the numbers on our license plate. I can count the trees behind them. But no matter what I do, I still can't make out the faces of the people standing next to that green SUV. And I still wonder if we were ever supposed to make it back home.